afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Whether you are joining us today as a parent, an educator, a school administrator, or even a community partner, we are really glad that you're in this room here with us today. Over the past several months across our state here in New Jersey, news and headlines have focused heavily on major school closures, budget cuts in districts such as Paterson, Trenton, and North Bergen, or program restructuring. As we were planning this session, we realized something critical. Transition isn't just about building, locking its doors permanently. Transition happens whenever a child's educational landscape shifts. It happens when specialized program ends, when two neighborhood schools are combined, and when boundaries are redrawn, or simply when a student moves from elementary to middle school. Change is inherent in education, but how we handle it determines how our kids experience it. So today, we're bringing together the New Jersey Family Engagement Hub, SEL4NJ, and Paterson Education Fund, because no single group can carry this weight alone. It really takes a village to anchor our children through times of change. I am the facilitator today. I'm Jeanette Mejias, co-director of the New Jersey Family Engagement Hub. And now I'm going to turn it over to Kim Rivers for team introductions. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kim Rivers, and I am the training coordinator for our hub. And now I'm going to pass it over to Faith.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Faith Victor. I'm the Northern Regional Family Engagement Specialist. Thank you for having us. Thank you for being here. And without further ado, Evan.
Thank you, Faith. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Evan Hardy. I am the Central Regional Family Engagement Specialist, and I would like to pass it along to Alexis.
Thank you, Evan. Good morning, everyone. My name is Alexis Pratt. I am the Community Engagement Specialist for the New Jersey Family Engagement Hub, and now I will pass it to Kiari for introductions.
Thank you, Alexis. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kiari Tyler. I'm the Virtual Event Support Specialist, and now to more information about the Hub.
Thank you, Kiari. So let's talk about our project. So our Family Engagement Hub, we are the statewide Family Engagement Hub for New Jersey. We are all about providing information support to families, educators, students, and communities. And it's all about building partnership. It's all about collaboration. The goal is to create systemic change and increase in family engagement, because the research shows that the higher the level of family engagement at our schools, the higher the level of student achievement and student success, and not just short term, but long term. So we are doing that in our work by providing these offerings, by working directly with our school districts into strengthening our student success. And now let's talk about SPAN. SPAN Parent Advocacy Network. We are the Parent Center for New Jersey. We are all about providing information, technical assistance, resources, and support for all families in a variety of program areas, whether it's early childhood, individual assistance through our Warm Line, even juvenile justice, child welfare, policy and systems advocacy. We are the Parent Center for New Jersey. And if you need help, if you need assistance, anyone who is interested in the development of children, growing into adults and going into our community, please go to our website at spanadvocacy.org. www.familyengagementhub.org so that we can see how we can help you. So today's topic, we're talking about school transitions. And school transitions really is about change. And we always have to remember that any change that happens at a school has a direct impact on that student and the student population. So what happens at school is going to impact that child. A school is not just a brick and mortar building. It's that place where they go to every day. It's where they learn math and reading. It is their social sanctuary. It's where they build relationships, form roots. They establish trust. They learn how to interact with each other and adults, and they learn about the world. And so when there is a disruption of their education, a disruption of the program, when they have to change to a different school, when they no longer have a teacher, when they're moving from one grade to the other even, or from middle school to high school, that is a transition that has an impact on that student and takes a toll. It disrupts their routines, their friendships. They have a new teacher, and that shift, that structural shift, can have repercussions throughout how they are and how they react and their relationship towards school. And it also can have an academic impact. Even developmental risks can happen because our students at various ages can be vulnerable, and they don't always tell us. They do not always share what is going on with them. The fact is, it's starting in a new building has an impact. It has an impact. And if unaddressed, the stress and the anxiety can manifest for our kids, whether it's behavior, whether it's academics, even developing into what we commonly refer to as school refusal or school avoidance. So we, as a village, really want to think about how we can work together and shift that focus from loss and disruption and prepare and support our students as a community, as educators, and as families. And it is at the core of what we do in family engagement. This is why we are doing this. When structural changes happen at a district level, parents often carry immense stress, especially when it's at the end of the year and you're thinking about the summertime where we are right now, and they feel helpless. Some parents are wondering, who are the teachers going to be? What is the school building going to be like? What are the staff going to be like? If you've got a special education student, those questions can be, well, will my child's services stay intact? What about the class size? Will it double? Who do I reach out to when something is wrong? Well, as stated before, research and experience tells us that strong family engagement is the single most effective buffer against student anxiety whenever there is crisis, whenever there is change. So when schools are transitioning and you've got a new influx, try to open your doors early so that parents know how to communicate proactively, have receiving staff, incorporate community organizations, and step in to offer support to help our students feel more secure. It is our shared responsibility as a community so that we can safeguard all of these issues. Because kids don't always have the words, they don't always communicate, they often have a lot of fears and anxiety walking into new environments, walking into new classrooms, new students, new teachers. So we want to help equip you with some action steps, empower educators with welcoming strategies, and leverage our community partners so we can help build that safety net around our kids. So let's go through some tips for families. Parents often ask, what can I actually do right now over the summer to help my child manage this transition? Well, here are some checklists, some tips that you can consider. Number one, connect with the staff. Yes, we are in August, but it's never too soon to start reaching out. You can get their contact information, contact the school. Typically, staff are returning to school at least 2 to 3 weeks before the school year starts for professional development and preparation. So reach out. Principals, vice principals, guidance counselors, administrative staff, they're working in the buildings throughout. Reach out to confirm your child's placement. Verify transportation lines. Double check room assignments. Handling those administrative details early on can take weight off your shoulder when that September rush begins. Another thing to consider, getting a walkthrough of that building. And, it's always a good thing to go check out not just a school building, but drive around the area, do a practice run of what that drive to school looks like. Especially if your child is moving to a new building and they feel anxiety about the larger space, maybe ask that office for a quiet, low pressure walkthrough before school starts. Even 15 minutes in an empty hallway to locate their new classroom. Find out where the cafeteria is. Practice opening a locker. That can really help remove that fear of the unknown. And children can visualize where they are going, and their overlying anxiety drops. Also, another great tip is to send in a profile of your student. Basically, a communication that tells the teacher and staff about who your kid is. It could be a simple one-pager. And here at SPAN, we actually have a positive student profile that we have utilized for years as a really great way to introduce a student to a classroom. You can email it, you can take a hard copy. Realistically, teachers don't typically receive detailed student background information until, they meet that kid. So sending in that snapshot, sharing your child's strengths, their hobbies, any challenges, any triggers, what gets them overwhelmed, what is their preferred way to communicate, anything they need to know can really establish an instant supportive partnership with your child's teacher from day one. Also, in our transitioning, establishing predictable home routines can really help. That's what you can do as families from home, because school transitions really pull our kids out of their comfort zone. So your home environment needs to feel extra predictable. So maybe about 2 weeks before school opens, start with adjusting their sleep schedules, morning wake-up times, their meal routines. Because having solid, familiar home structures can really create that emotional anchor and helps our kids process the stress of changing their school schedule. Also, identifying the safe adults. Help your child identify people within their building. Talk through who is there to help them. And maybe this is something that takes place within the first week of school. Take them around, introduce them, help the administrators, the counselors, the attendant staff, the school nurse, the main office secretary, and of course their teacher identify that student and put a face to that name. And that also helps to reassure your child that if they ever feel lost, whether they feel overwhelmed, whether they feel anxious during the day, that they can have some designated, trusted adults who they can talk to if they need assistance. And then that's not just for the adults. Also, peer-to-peer connections is another thing that can help. So it helps them to identify other students, introduce them to kids, foster those social anchors, if possible, before day one. So, for example, if your child is moving to a receiving school where they don't know many kids, maybe what you can do as a parent or family member is reach out to the local parent groups, the sport groups, the PTA networks, and maybe set up some casual pre-start of school summer meetups or play dates with other families, or maybe even other incoming families who are experiencing the same transitions. Because seeing on day one, even one familiar face in the hallway can transform what could be a very intimidating experience into one where you feel welcomed, where you feel as if you belong. And that is one of the core principles of what we do within family engagement practices. And of course, we just did a presentation last month about this, but really identify who that whole school team is. And that requires some intentionality, because children rarely come home and say, Mom, I'm feeling really overloaded and overwhelmed by all the noise at school and the cafeteria. No. What our kids do is they tend to shut down or they act out. And so that's why having that whole school team approach is necessary. That means identify the teachers, the school nurse, the attendance office, the secretary, the vice principal, the principal, everyone in the staff. Find out their contact information, be able to reach out to them the way in which they prefer to be contacted, and get them written down in your phone or contact list so that you know who they are and how to get to them. And then if your child is struggling through some transition, send them a note. Send them that one page about who your kid is before day one. Share not just the challenges that your kid has, but share what their strengths are, what they excel at, what are their hobbies, what can help them feel comforted that they can do when they feel stressed, and how you prefer to communicate, whether it's you prefer to communicate by text or by email, or the teacher prefers to get text, or what window of time is best. When we approach educators as partners working towards the same goal, we can create a strong and unified circle around our kids. And now we are going to pass it over to our partner, Erica Branton, who is the consultant for school culture and climate initiative with SEL4NJ, and she is going to be doing the rest from here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kim. Hi, everyone. It's so nice to be here with you today. I thought, and I like to utilize the chat a little bit. So if you're able to use the chat with me, that would be fantastic. If you're not, no worries at all. I'm just going to ask some reflection questions. You can think about it, or you can enter your thoughts into the chat. I should also say that I am doing the educator portion of this workshop. So I'm really talking about what educators can do to support themselves, parents, and students through this transition. And I want you to think about, or if you are able to enter one word into the chat, what school transitions feel like for educators. So I will look at the chat. If you could enter one word about how school transitions feel for educators. And again, no worries if you're not able to. I would just maybe just food for thought. Okay, so we have a couple of a few responses here. Thank you all so much. So we have overwhelming, stressful, anxiety producing, chaotic, absolutely. Very similar to, I imagine, how everyone is feeling in these moments. Relieved. Interesting. I'm curious about that. And maybe hopeful. That's wonderful. So there's some optimistic, positive aspects of this too. So I wanted to bring this up because all of these responses make sense, and students just don't experience the structural change of school transitions and school closings, but they experience it through the adults around them. So we want to think about how educators are navigating this change too. Well, of course, there's a sense of loss, possibly. So there could be a loss of relationships or routines that they were used to, or maybe their identity of what they, used to think about themselves and their roles last year or the years before. And then, of course, community is shifting. There is a lot of uncertainty. So the questions I think that everybody is asking, educators are also asking. So what will happen next? What will my role be? What will happen to my students? I think also questions around who will my new students be? Who will my new community be? Are part of that uncertainty. And then, of course, there's a sense of responsibility. So all of these things are happening, and yet I have to every day show up for my students and be the best teacher I can be. So I wanted to bring this up because when we think about educators creating stability for students, we also want to think about creating conditions that support educator stability. One way I find to be very helpful to think about creating stability is by thinking about where we're putting our energy and attention. So, are we putting our energy and attention into things that we can not control? So, the factors around us, the decisions that are being made that we just have no control over, or are we putting our energy and our focus and attention on things that we can control? So if you look at this little visual here and we focus on the outside of the circle, these are things that most likely educators cannot control. And I say most likely because I don't want to promote a sense of powerlessness, because there are things that educators and all adults can do to, in this process, but most likely decisions about the closure or the different timelines that are being made or how staffing is being structured, where students will end up, and really how other adults are responding around them. So how are parents, how are administrators, how are other adults responding? Most likely educators do not have control over, but there are things that we do have control over. And I say we because I'm a former educator. So I sometimes still think about myself as a teacher. So there's 4 components that I put into the circle that I think are really worthwhile paying attention to. So we have presence. So our presence can be so stabilizing and really is something we can control. So are we able to be calm and available, acknowledging that this is still hard, so we can say this is hard, and I can also try to be as present as possible. And what about communication? So that is something that I can control. I can share what I know with parents, with students. I can be as open and transparent as possible. And I can also be honest about things that I don't know. So if students are asking me questions, or if families are asking me questions, or other teachers, and I don't know, I can simply be honest and say, those are not things that I have information for. The classroom is obviously the primary way that a teacher has control. So there are so many things that a teacher can do in their own classroom. It's like their domain, right? So routines, as Kim was saying earlier, at home, routines for educators are also so important, especially those, I like to call them the first 6 weeks. first 6 weeks of any school year are so critical to creating and sustaining those really, really, really embedded routines that we want kids to feel comfortable with. It provides them with a sense of safety. You know, they might have a whole bunch of questions about what's happening with school closures, but they don't have to question their schedule for the day, or they don't have to question how to line up, or they don't have to question how other students are going to behave in the class. So those are things that we can control. We can make sure that our expectations are clear. And then our relationships can really be something that we can control. So we can notice when students are struggling. We can maintain our connections with our students. We can maintain connections with families. I think one of the things that Kim had mentioned earlier that is so important for parents, but also for educators, is to really get to know our students and our families. So not just, contacting a parent or a family member when there's a problem, but being proactive to say, I'm going to establish these relationships early on. I want to know what my students' strengths are. Sometimes I would send home a one-pager, and as Kim had mentioned, this is something that for families that they have as a resource. But I would send home a one-pager that just asked, tell me all about your student. Tell me all about your child. What are their strengths? What are their things that they're working on? What do they love? And it's a wonderful way of establishing connection really, really early on. So going with this question of what we can control and what is out of our control, I thought we would have a little exercise together, because I think these questions are interesting, around what are things that educators can control and what are some things that they can influence, right? So maybe not directly control, but have a positive, or I guess in some contexts, a negative influence. And what are some things that we just can't control that we can shift our energy away from? So I'm curious, I'm going to go through each one, and I'm curious to hear from you. If you think that this is something that educators could have control over, you can put a C in the chat. If you think it's something they can influence, you could put an I. And if you think it's just something they cannot control, you could put a CC, or you can just write can't, or whatever makes the most sense for you. So curious to hear from you. What about how students feel about the closure? So is that something that educators can control, influence, or can't control? Oh, I'm sorry, I should have mentioned, if you could put your answers into the chat, that would be fantastic. And if you can't, that's absolutely okay too. Okay, so we have influence. And just something we can control. Oh, interesting. Someone said two, influence and can't control. Influence. Yep. So no right or wrong answers here. I also thought that this was something, at first I thought it was something we can't control, because students are going to feel the way they feel about the closure. But I shifted a little bit to thinking about that this is something we can influence, because we can create those positive classroom environments for children where they feel maybe this, and some of you had mentioned into the chat earlier that maybe this is a positive change, and we can look at things optimistically. So again, no right or wrong answers, but interesting to hear your thoughts. So number 2, whether students know what is happening. So is that something we can control, influence, or can't control? Yes. Oh, sorry, I should have waited another minute. I'm just going to, because for timing purposes, just also agree that I agree that we can control this. We can be the messengers of the information so that students know what's happening. And again, we can be honest and say, that's something that I'm unsure about, if we don't have the answer, but we can absolutely control what information we're sharing with children. And how about creating a predictable classroom routine? Yep. I agree. I think this is probably one of those things, the most important thing that we can do and is completely in our direct control. Number 4, whether families are angry. Any thoughts around that? So I see 1, influence. Can't control. We have 2, can't control and influence. Yep. I am with you, Nicole. I also was a little bit in between those 2. I think we can do our best to help support parents through this process, but whether they're angry or not is maybe not something we can necessarily, not that we can't influence it, but I wonder if it's better, our energy is better spent supporting the positive aspects of our classroom community and communication to support parents, but that we might not be able to change how they feel. And then 5, helping a student identify a trusted adult in their new school. Influence, control, can't control. Thank you all by the way, this is a fantastic group. I love how interactive we are all being. Thank you so much. All right, so influence, control. I agree. I also thought this was influence. It's maybe, hard to find somebody. We can't control whether a child has a trusted adult or trusts someone, but we can definitely influence that and make sure, as Kim was mentioning earlier, that there is somebody in the school, whether it's the classroom teacher or the guidance counselor or an administrator or the gym teacher or anybody that a child feels connected to is super important. And then, of course, this last one, just making time to check in with students. So whether that's in the beginning of the school year, having 5 to 10 minute check-ins where you just say, I would actually meet children if I was an educator before school started, if I was able to just check in with them and see if how I might be able to support them. But of course, that's not always possible. So maybe in the first couple of weeks of school, just having a list of all your students and making sure you have that 5 to 10 minute check-in with them. So I see a lot of control, and I agree. I think that that's one of the most helpful and important ways that we can make sure that we're creating that trust and rapport with our students. So again, I would just have a list of the students in my class. Every time I met with them and I just made sure I got to everyone in my class, I would just check it off, and I would just have a 5 to 10 minute getting to know you. So just making sure they know that I'm here and always available for them. So one of the things that I think is really important in grounding us in the things that we can control is this idea of creating anchors. And so I thought that we could consider 3 different areas of creating an anchor. We have predictability, and we have connection, and we have agency. So I'm going to go through each one of these. If there is something that you think, I see some buzz in the chat. So I just want to encourage the folks in this room, if there's a practice that you think would be really helpful, to please make sure that you put that into the chat. I have my own ideas and some ideas, but the wisdom in the room is a lot greater than one person. So I see some folks writing in, and please take a moment to look through the chat. So again, we can create that accountability. So if a child is wondering who they can count on, we can create that for them. We can keep routines consistent and supportive. We can preview changes before they happen. So whether that's a change in schedule or maybe a new student is coming in, previewing with a child is always such a wonderful way. And if you're a parent too, I think that this is, as Kim had mentioned earlier, a really useful tool to get them to not worry about what's coming, the unknown, but to really help them see what's in front of them. And being explicit about what's staying the same. And I think that this last bullet is important, especially for older kids, to not assume that students know what's happening. sometimes when kids are in middle school and high school, we can just assume that they know because they're older. But I think the more we're able to share with them and not take for granted that they might have this information, the better. Again, we can use that sense of connection. So having those intentional check-ins, seeing if there's any changes in student behavior, and really, really communicating with families as much as possible, understanding which students may need additional support. When I was an educator, I wouldn't really like when teachers would tell me about the students from the year before because I always wanted to make my own impressions. So that's a practice that I think sometimes is, it depends on the teacher. So sometimes they want to know from a teacher before, or a parent, all about the child. Sometimes they want to get to know them themselves, but really thinking about what kind of extra support, if any, is needed early on. And then helping students maintain that relationship with one another. I think one thing is, in those first 6 weeks, it's not only about building routine, but it's also about building relationships from educator to child, from child to child, and from educator to parent. And so how can we help students to really form positive relationships with one another? And I would really encourage any educator to think about doing that within that first 6 weeks, because that will really support not only students, but will really also support educators. Everything is easier when kids are happy and connected. And then what kind of agency are we offering children? So what can they have a say in? They have a lot of things that are out of their control, but how can we offer them meaningful choices? How can we ask them to give their, and I would say an example of that could be like classroom jobs, or even something as simple as, you can write this story and you can either type it on the computer, or you can write it in pencil, or you can draw a picture, or you could do this. But any kind of choice that a child can have could be a really meaningful area for them to feel a sense of agency. Helping let students to help shape new routines. So even asking them, how do you think our classroom is going? Do you think there's anything else we could be doing differently? How do you feel about this? Creating surveys or just informally asking them is a wonderful way to get student feedback. And then really helping them to see the things that they can influence. So helping them to see in the classroom all the things that they have autonomy over and they have agency over. Okay, so I'm just gonna, this is just gonna be, I was gonna do an exercise in this, but I'm gonna just talk about it. I want you to think about a scenario where you just started a new school year and half of your class is returning from last year, and the other half of your class are children who are coming from new schools. Kids are nervous, parents are nervous, right? This is like a real life situation. You have these group of however many students in front of you and families contacting you. So just considering, and we're not going to answer these in the chat, but just thinking about, well, what can students count on? What is the predictable factor that you're going to create that students can really count on given in this environment? In terms of connection, what could you do to support students' connection, either with each other or with you, or bringing in the family, making sure the family is front and center? And then maybe what is the first thing you might do to create agency? Will you have, how can children in your classroom have voice? So will they make choices about what they want to learn? Will they choose classroom jobs? Will they give you feedback as a teacher? So just thinking about those small things that we can do to really create those anchors for children. And so I am finished with my educator portion. I'm going to pass it along. And I hope that this was good information for you, both as educators and as families, and you took some useful tips from it. So I'm going to pass it along to Rosie. And thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you, Erica. And yes, now we are going to continue our presentation, and I'd like to introduce Ms. Rosie Grant. She is the Executive Director of Patterson Education Fund. And Rosie is going to continue our presentation with a focus on community. Thank you, Rosie.
Thank you so much, Kim. Good morning, everyone. I am happy to be here and so glad that you took some time out of your day to join us today. At Patterson Education Fund, our work is to engage the community to improve Patterson Public Schools' capacity to educate every child to high standards. So a lot of what we do is community engagement. We do it all through partnering with other organizations and with the community so that we are focused on collective impact. So whether it's parent and family engagement or Patterson Reads, community schools, or after school or summer program, it's all done in collaboration with schools and community partners. And so I want to bring just a few of those strategies and suggestions to you today as we look at the community's role. So I wanted to start by saying transitions are not merely logistics. Yes, we have to move the student from one place to the other, one system to the other, etc. But look at them as an opportunity to build relationships. I'm calling them relationships moments. This is where we are navigating and the kids are meeting new people. There are new expectations and routines and systems. And the support is so important as we look at transition. So think about, as a parent or as someone who is involved with a community-based organization, who do you have relationships with? Are there people that you know in your role, whether you're at the Y or the Boys and Girls Club or some other place? We'll look at the organizations in a minute. Do you know someone in the building that you have a relationship with so that you can do that connection for the family or for the parents and even friends? Well, find a friend. Find a friend through your community-based organizations because they work closely with the schools. Also, in our role in the community, we should meet the teacher. We should know what is happening in the school. Maybe it's the nurse or the security guard, the lunch monitor, the janitors. These are all people who can be our friends inside the buildings. Think about whether anyone in your community org work in the building. And then here's an example of, it's a graphic that I borrowed. I gave credit. I left the name in the center. It's from Housing Alexandria. But look at the breadth of our villages, families, students, school and district staff, municipalities, the agencies, the nonprofits, clergy, faith communities, library, cultural art groups. The list goes on. I won't read them all to you. I'm sure you will have a copy of the slide. But who are those trusted neighbors and leaders? In our work, we call them trusted messengers. Who are the trusted messengers that can outreach to parents or that parents can outreach to? Are you in a community-based setting where you have home visitation? Those people, those are trusted messengers. They can also bring the information about schools to the parents and to the students to help them in these transitional moments. So our definition is everyone who has any contact with children and families make up the community and have a role in helping our kids in their transition and their education success. Think about housing folks too, or even your pediatricians. A lot of pediatricians hand out school information or hand out early reading information, the WellCare visits. So take advantage of those as community-based organizations. We connect to them, and we're here to help you also connect to the school. We have lots of contacts inside the school because we have a long history of working in the community with our children and families. We call it learned wisdom. So here's a look at a graphic around what are schools and whose schools are they, right? Schools do not exist in a bubble. They exist in a community and they belong to our communities. There are schools, there are children, and there are schools. And so it's important that the village, the community, is collaborating. And in doing so, we're helping to honor the school culture. We're building shared goals. We're expanding resources. And we're creating a shared responsibility. I always say, my success is your success when I'm talking to my fellow community-based organization leaders or to folks inside the school. Because if they're successful in the good work that they're doing, then we all win because our children benefit. After-school programs is another place where it can be a very helpful place to have some transitional information. It's what we do. We collaborate with the school. We're making sure that our programs align, but we also want to make sure that the kids have smooth transitions. And so we think about what's happening in school and we make sure that's happening in after-school programs as well. In Patterson, we spent a whole year and a half training people inside the schools to implement restorative practices, and in some schools, healing-centered engagement through the New Jersey Principals and Supervisors Association. And then we said, wait a minute, what about the community-based organization? It was always the plan that when kids have these supportive environments in school, then we want them to transition to spaces in the community at 3 o'clock that also mirror that supportive environment and understand and expand on the cultures that we have created inside the school buildings. So just a reminder that a list of programs is not the same as a partnership system. People actually have to be deliberately working together to make sure that they are aligning what they offer and they're moving in the same direction to support our students. So there are some things that in a coordinated village, if you'd go back just for a moment, in a coordinated village, there's some questions that are important to ask. What do students and family need? Who can help? How do we connect them? And then how do we follow up? In Patterson, we have an organization, Patterson Alliance, whose sole job is uniting all the community-based organizations. So 100 or so of us come together monthly to talk about the work that we're doing in schools and in the community for children and families. And so here we have a recommendation. We have community schools in my community and in several communities across New Jersey and of course across the United States. Community schools organize partnerships around students. There are some pillars of community schools in the federal model: integrated student supports, expanded learning opportunities, family and community engagement, and collaborative leadership. Those are full service community schools, but there are other models. We also promote the Journey for Justice, sustainable community schools, where 4 of the pillars are the same, and then there are 2 more. The beauty of community schools is that there is a site coordinator. Besides bringing all the services kids need to the school, there's a site coordinator who is hired by a community-based organization, but works in the school and can be a liaison to parents and to students, doing things like going, here's a phone number. But overall, what we're looking for is a warm handoff from one thing to another as students transition. So we're here. We know We know this partner or we know that partner, and they're expecting you. We make the phone call and we give you the information. In transition, I think there are 3 time periods that we ought to look at and pay attention to. There's the before, and what we can do as community-based organizations in the before so that parents can access. We can do orientations. We can work with a neighborhood school if we're in a particular neighborhood, bring the folks from the school to our summer program, run summer bridge programs. Many of us do that, and make sure that the kids are ready and that there's outreach to the parents. Now, during the transition, help the kids and the parents navigate the system, provide mentoring, make sure their basic needs are met, provide translation, and provide family support. Remember that ready to learn is a whole lot more than packing a backpack. And we covered that in some of our SPAN workshops. But that's where we can play a role as the community during the transition. And then after the transition, don't just let go. You know, school starts on September 4th. Don't go, we got them there. There's still more work to do. We want to do some check-ins with the parents. We want to make sure that there's attendance support. There's the after-school connection. Don't do after school in a vacuum. And to make sure kids and families have this sense of belonging in school and in the after-school program. How schools move from good intentions to coordinated actions. Here we have for you, they'll be in the chat or you'll get them afterwards, some resources. So we have a sample community partners meeting agenda that we use. How do you bring partners to the table? How do we collaborate to make sure that we're meeting the needs of the kids? We don't want it to just be, oh, here's what we provide. We want it to be, here's what we're doing that meets the need. So start with the need, think about who the partners are, help people define their roles. I think everybody has a role in education and certainly in this transitional process. Think about referrals and follow up that will eventually lead to the outcomes that we want. We want kids to be in safe, supported learning environments with relationships that support that. So ask yourself the question, which transition in your school community most needs a stronger village? And when you think about the village, go back to that chart and think about who might be missing from that table. There are some people that are not your typical partners, but they come when you ask them. Our firehouses will come to our schools and hold a barbecue in the schoolyard when you ask them. So outreach to those other community-based and municipal partners. And finally, the goal is not to surround schools with more programs. There are programs coming at the schools every time you turn around. What we want the goal to be is to surround students and families with connected people. Back to those relationships, with resources, with opportunities, and most especially to do this during those times of change. So I will end there. I'm mindful of time, and I am going to pass you over to Jeanette, who has a survey for us.
Thank you so much, Rosie and Erica and Kim. Okay, it's time for a quick survey. So we're going to invite you to either scan the QR code and take a moment to complete our short survey, and we'll also put it in the chat. We'll give you about, 20 seconds. That was quick. Thank you for filling out the survey. As you know, data is very important for us. So if you filled it out, thank you. So let's do a quick overview on key takeaways. As we wrap up today, I want us to bring us back to why we were here together. SEL 4NJ, the Patterson Education Fund, and the New Jersey Family Engagement Hub all share one core belief. Our communities are strongest when we work side by side. Our shared mission is simple. No single school, parent, or organization can manage these transitions alone. When we combine trauma-informed SEL practices, strong family engagement, and local advocacy, we create a safety net that allows, that actually follows our children wherever they go. And so first, understand, families need clear, steady information to navigate school changes without getting pulled into local politics. Our focus stays on the student stability, which Kim had highlighted throughout the presentation. Second, prepare. We can help families shift from summer worry to summer readiness, connecting with 12-month staff, scheduling walkthroughs, and building predictable routines at home. And third, support. We center social emotional well-being by listening to kids, validating their feelings, and making sure every student knows who their trusted, safe adults are in the new building. That's the work, that's the village, and that's why we are here today. And now that concludes a portion of our webinar, but I'm going to go ahead and highlight a couple of events. First, we invite you to join us at our upcoming webinar on September 8th, Digital Boundaries, Real World Awareness, and a Family Approach to Student Safety. And the link will be in the chat. We also invite you to Count It Out. This is an in-person Count It Out movie viewing for parents, families, and communities, which will be on October 15th. Please scan the QR code to register, and the link is also placed in the chat. And then we have our Ohio Summit. This is a Family Engagement Leadership Summit. It's a professional learning event that's dedicated to advancing effective family school community partnerships from K to 12. And this summit is going to bring research to action, providing schools, families, and community partners tools that they need to work together. And we'll put the link in the chat so you can register. That will be on Friday, September 18th, and the deadline is September 11th. And then we invite you on September 18th, the evening of September 18th at 6:30 to join us at the end of summer soiree, which is a fundraising event hosted by SPAN, and we hope to see you there. Again, the link is in the chat. And once again, thank you. If you didn't get an opportunity to fill out the survey, please do so by scanning the QR code. We know that you could have been anywhere else, but you chose to be with us. We thought that this was very important information as we propel into the school year. We wish you a great rest of your day, and thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time here